Hi everyone, Gabathy here, and it's time to remake a video I did a while ago, which has now been removed due to its poor quality. Today we're going to talk about a metal album, and possibly my favorite one of all time. The only album I consider to be a masterpiece that rivals even that of Francis the Mute. But before you watch this video, be sure to check out the other reviews I did of their other albums. So this makes the third and final review of Mr. Bungle at the moment. They did release Wrath of the Easter Bunny, though I don't have much to say about it, so unless they happen to release anything else, I probably won't be making any more videos about this band. Mr. Bungle, and especially Mike Patton, don't really need an introduction, but what does need introduction is the album they released just before breaking up. After a 2-year break, which saw Faith No More split, Mr. Bungle reconvened in 1998 to record new material. The new material came in the form of this charming, flashy, ska jazz album with some alternative rock and reggae influences. I would say that California is to Bungle what I presume Danger Days is to My Chemical Romance, or perhaps Mesmerize and Hypnotize were to System of a Down. This is the softest Mr. Bungle album of the group, and yes, that stereotype typically means the worst, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Please don't let the fact that not all the songs on this album are switching it up and doing the genre flipping distract you from the fact that there are some goddamn bangers on this one. While California might be the most subtle and accessible release from Mr. Bungle, that doesn't stop it from being their strongest to date. In fact, I would dare say that even though it's not as ambitious with its sound as their previous release Disco Volante was, it's arguably their most mature, and even more arguably their most fun, Mr. Bungle album released thus far. It's a lot more tight and well-produced. There's no long, obnoxious skits thrown here for 14 minutes total across the whole album. Mike isn't being stupid, there's no over-the-top screaming or stupid gibberish. It's very tame, and it's not that creepy or dark compared to their last two albums. It still has some of that Mr. Bungle energy, namely the most Mr. Bungle track on this entire album is definitely None of Them Knew They Were Robots, and it's actually the best damn song on the album as well, and I would even dare to say that it's fantastic enough to perhaps even be better than Stub-a-Dub. This absolute beast of a track jumps right into the action with this shimmering drum shuffling under this kicking bass riff. There's this whole orchestra of horns. It sounds super fucking dramatic. I love Mike's reverb-drenched voice singing ominously over top of it. Then we jump right into this crazy-ass guitar solo, sounding straight from the 60s as the members yell incoherently. There's this organ lead into a Scooby-Doo-esque chorus accompanied by fantastic horn refrains and an added vocal melody ad-lib just to spice things up. We slow things down into this mysterious segment before popping into this fresh-ass bouncy guitar strum, starts building into these cartoony ad-libs before the song returns to the intense choir, and then we get bombarded with all these Looney Tunes sound effects on all ends. Mike starts throwing out wacky Scatman-esque noises over the intense organ and this extremely chilling siren that dominates over it. I love the Billy and Mandy-ass alteration between horns and bells as the group sings in harmony, and then we revert back to those insane horns and cartoon sound effects as we return to the chorus, but this time with more raw intensity and the sound of a car crash. There's the slow transition into another added spiked up punch. It's already intense, and these beat switch-ups are just smashing you in the face again and again and again. The drums carry the instrumentation into this mysterious, whispery segment before we pick right back up into the insanity. The song flows super nicely for how quickly it changes in tone. I love the shifty click noises pushing the bass riff and Mike's laid-back voice around in a rhythmic fashion. I also love his Elvis-esque delivery before the sirens come back and Mike starts throwing out screams from fucking nowhere. We slow down once more before having our final build-up into the climax as Mike's vocal delivery is amped up to 11. His vocals also drop in quality and now he just sounds like he's yelling into a walkie-talkie. This entire song is just basically if rockabilly met metal, and it's super solid. The track Air Conditioned Nightmare has this bright, shimmering cinematic orchestra with Mike's high-pitched, beautiful voice to accompany it. I love the snapping, shuffling percussion dancing in harmony with the bass guitar. We switch into Beast Boys mode and get hit with a sick surfer rock section with this unhinged electronic synth building up over it. My favorite part is the hype-ass drumming as Mike sings about dementia. It's fucking crazy. Then we transition into this cute, but honestly kind of sad, cartoony jazz segment with this ocean of reverb on all the vocal tracks. Sooner or later, we run right back into the bongos and crazy bass guitar, and then we chill into this calmer, more reggae-inspired segment as Mike yells like a goofball in the background. Honestly, it was at this point that I realized there's a lot less harsh, abrasive, thrash, or death metal on this album, but it's still definitely present, especially on tracks like the final cut, Goodbye Sober Day. It's a pretty cut and dry song about the pain of addiction, kind of has a System of a Down style going for it. We start with this pretty catchy, if admittedly punchy and blunt shift of notes in this alt-rock section, and then it switches up into this pseudo-religious chant with borderline Middle Eastern instrumentation. Mike is literally speaking English, and he still somehow makes it sound like a completely different language. Then we shift into this aggressive metal segment with Mike shouting out viscerally and the members chanting in unison. Sounds super devilish. So there's still elements of the older sound that we know Mr. Bungle for, but there's still plenty of new stuff being brought to the table as well. None of it's too jarring or out there, but it's unique and different from what they did before. Golem 2, the Bionic Vapor Boy, is one of the most underrated tracks on California. It's this funky techno beat with Mike's mischievous vocals shifting over these glitchy electronic synths. Kind of reminds me of Inspector Gadget, but more so the robot boss from Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards. It's very video gamey. It makes me wish that Mr. Bungle did a video game soundtrack. It's funny I say that given the retro sound effects that were all over the first album, but if there's any song that I think feels like it's straight from a video game soundtrack, it would 100% be ARS Moriendi for how much it reminds me of the game Shantae. ARS Moriendi is this strange track that jumps from Turkish-inspired instrumentation straight into Balkan metal. The constantly shifting instrumental and Egyptian instrumentation combined with Mike's ability to just fucking lose it on the mic. The violin are dramatic, yet a totally needed touch for this track as well, but I really have to feel bad for the drummer because he fucking snapped on this one. That said, California is not really their heaviest album, as many of the tracks on it are a lot softer and a lot less hard-hitting. Retro Vertigo is a much slower cut than what they usually do, and it's this super mysterious and dramatic critique of consumerism and the value we place on money or human lives. Putting aside the fact that I honestly think Retro Vertigo has some of Mike's best vocal performance in terms of passion, as well as the super ominous but at the same time charming guitar paired with the thick booming drums and just beautiful, smooth, sugary style the whole song has going for it, I can see why this slower approach might take some people off guard. Not to mention how the song is consistent and it doesn't flip genres midway through. With slower cuts like this taking up a good portion of the album, it is understandable that it's not as crazy or as hard-hitting as what they did before. Sure, but I don't think we should just ignore it because of that. Because even though there are slower cuts on this album, I think these slower cuts are still handled pretty impressively and with quite a bit of detail and care to make it sound fucking great. Pink Cigarette, for example, is a super solid and very pretty rockabilly number with some amazing 60s-ass guitar work and vocal performance. It also makes me think of Red Dead Redemption for some reason. The subject matter in particular is pretty dark as it entails a story of a narcissistic relationship coming to a close with a male killing himself, so make of that what you will. You got Sweet Charity, which is this super cute, super fun and lovable ballad with the sound of a beach to kick it off before we get treated to these smooth drums alongside this beautiful guitar. Makes me think of The Best Day Ever by SpongeBob. I love Mike's vocal performance, I love how dorky it is, and I love how sweet and fresh it is. The production on this album is just really amazing, honestly. You also have Vanity Fair, which I personally would say is the weakest track on the album, and it's a pretty stereotypical ska song, nothing really to write home about, but it's catchy and you get the point, just doesn't really have anything impressively new that you haven't seen on the album already. I think my favorite slower track is Holy Filament, which is this super magical, mysterious, eerie, atmospheric, sort of Atlantis-inspired track, with this very Earth, Wind, and Fire type delivery. The harmony on the thing is great. I love how Mike casually just works his way from F-sharp 5 to G5. The various layers of his vocals all sound like a whole-ass choir. The composition is fantastic, and the song is just honestly something I cannot get enough of. California is super fucking solid. Like, none of the songs overstay their welcome. All 10 of them are super well produced, super catchy, super interesting. It's constantly switching it up in style, but it's never so in your face or blunt about it, especially not as much as the last two albums. It's a lot more mature than what they've done before, but at the same time, it's still fun. It still feels like a beautiful shitpost album. The only difference is that now the shitpost music doesn't end with a whole minute-long skit of someone taking a shit. It doesn't feel all doom and gloom now. It's a little more positive and upbeat with its tone, but it feels experimental too, and some of the tracks still get a bit dark. In my honest opinion, this is genuinely the best Mr. Bungle album, which is kinda insane considering how much less experimentation there actually is. However, with the unique sound, this should honestly be mentioned in the same breath as classics like Nevermind, Toxicity, Black Parade, OK Computer, and In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. Like, it speaks to Mike's talents that Even his most listenable and easygoing album under this project is still leagues more powerful and brilliantly crafted than, like, most normal rock albums. I'm genuinely surprised this thing doesn't have more of a cult following because it fucking deserves it. Mr. Bungle was a band that tried to mutilate music and mesh it together to be whatever the fuck they wanted. You have to respect the ambition they had, and the stubbornness and dedication they used to make 3 of the most unique albums they possibly could, each of which inspired completely different facets of music, but it's not just that it's quirky and experimental, it's that they did whatever the hell they wanted and didn't give a single flying fuck what anybody had to say about it.